Most enterprises I talk to are heavily investing in AI for their customer experience operations, so the internal mechanics. They're running pilots, building agents, choosing models. Most of them are hitting actually like a wall within, say, 6 to 8 weeks. The output looks plausible, but it can't be acted on because no one can trace back where the answer came from. And when something goes wrong, there's no real way to audit this. The instinct is to blame the model, get a better one, retune the prompts, and like get that in place again. But that's the wrong diagnosis. I think the model isn't the problem. It's the data structure underneath it. I mean, giving all your data to an LLM is clearly not the answer, especially not in an enterprise organization where there's so many different fragment data sets that are not even talking to each other. So I've spent a long time working on this specific problem. And in this video, I want to talk about how to pinpoint exactly why your CX pilots aren't producing like the outputs you can act on, and the data foundation that needs to be in place before they actually can. So you can walk into a room with your data, product, and AI teams, explain exactly what needs to be built, where it has to live, and what it does, okay? So every enterprise has like 3 ways to understand their customers. There's the business intelligence, like our dashboards, like telling what is happening, how much is happening, what it is the quantification of all the signals we're getting. So they tell you what the numbers are doing. Okay, NPS dropped 3 points, cost to serve is up, revenue is down, amount of baggage that are booked are down. Like what the dashboards don't tell you is why. Okay, then we have the voice of customer lens. Surveys, interviews, verbatims, research. They tell you what customers say. It's rich, it's real. It has some meaningful scale, but we also know like less people are inclined to fill out surveys. So we need to get like our support tickets involved and the call recordings. It's almost impossible to act on consistently, right? Because again, it lives in different systems. Third lens, the interaction data itself. So the amount of support tickets is one thing, but like actually reading what people are saying and how the interactions are going is another. Event tracking, like click analytics, like path analytics, like really understanding like what journeys people go through and what are the events that are getting triggered, like on our digital platforms, on our apps. And then we have the actual call recordings of all the support interactions we're having. So this tells you what individuals actually did one interaction at the time. These are great signals. Everyone's real. Every team is capturing them, analyzing them, and putting that into practice on improving it. Tagging the same word in these different systems is collocation, not necessarily integration. The data ends up in the same vicinity, but like reasoning over it can not lead to great outcomes. It worked well enough when there were people in the loop, right, to resolve this gap. Like an analyst could use to analyze the NPS dip, pull the relevant verbatims, check the support volume, synthesize it to like a business impact. It was slow, expensive, inconsistent, and only worked on like big ticket items. It was functional, but it didn't really scale, okay? So the human was absorbing the ambiguity like the data structure couldn't. And I think this is interesting because agentic AI supposes that we should remove the human from this loop. The ambiguity was once merely inconvenient becomes a thing that you can't afford. But I think that's actually not what's right. But what actually happens when you point an AI agent at like unstructured customer experience data environment and you ask something like, why is it cost to serve rising in our onboarding experience? Or, I mean, this is something that you would already have inferred to that these two things are related. Typically what's happening, like the cost to serve is rising. Why is that? And then understanding that the problem stems from the onboarding is already like a foundational insight. But let's say you have those two together, then still understanding what exactly you need to fix is really, really hard. And the agent needs to understand what onboarding means, not as a label, but as a structure. What phases, steps our customers go through? Like how do we segment that between different personas, different customer groups, different markets, different geos? Like what are the evidence we're collecting from those different groups of people? What are the KPIs that the teams are tracking and who is actually working on what? So I need to help my AI to understand like the pain points, where they map onto what we measure, where they map onto what we're doing about it, and what we are lacking in terms of like understanding our customers. So without all of that structure in place, we just feed everything in the big bucket of onboarding and magically hope our AI model will make sense of that. The problem is it will make sense of it. It will give an answer. It will give you analysis. It will sound and look very, very polished. But again, it's not really traced back to the source and you can't be sure it's triangulated. That's the real problem. So AI needs to understand like what it's permitted to do with that information. Without the structure any agent does what the language models do when the context is thin. It produces a confident answer. It sounds plausible, but it's not grounded in something you can actually audit, right? And that's where most, especially in the enterprise, where most customer experience operations initiatives fail, because like it sounds like nice in the demo, the model is capable, but the data environment isn't there. That's the big problem we need to fix. So enterprises have been outsourcing semantic alignment to people for decades. And with semantic alignment, I mean like in this system onboarding means this, and that system onboarding means that. Here the MPS dip is seen. How do we triangulate all of that and bring it together? That was a people's job. And all of a sudden we're asking an agent to do that. Well, then we have to be intentional about the data structure, because the context that is in the heads of people is not like there for the agent to use. The fix isn't a better model. So let me explain what Ontology actually is in this context and why it's different from what most customer experience teams today have. Okay, the tag lists or the topic list tells the system what to call something, right? A taxonomy tells how things are categorized. Here's our product lines, here's our service lines, here's our business units. Here's how we talk about the different geographies that we're serving, the different markets that have a denominator. Okay, great. But an ontology goes a little bit further. It defines what the things are, but also how they relate to each other. Okay, and what can be done with them in a form that a machine, in this case AI, can reason over, not just look up. So in practice for customer experience, that means defining a set of core objects. A customer journey is a great one. A phase is an object inside of it. A step is an object inside of it. An opportunity is an object inside of it. A pain point, a solution, a metric. Each of these is a first-class concept, an object, a building block of its own structure and its own relationships. Not like a column header in a spreadsheet or a database. It's not a filter in a dashboard. They can become one, but think of these building blocks in two groups because they do two different jobs. So the first group, journey, phase, step, are what I call location primitives. Okay, they answer the question, where does something happen? A journey is like an end-to-end arc, right? And I mean, we're not going to talk about the individual journeys that customers have. There's millions of them. No. It's an abstraction level that helps you to organize your data. So what I mean by that, journey is an end-to-end arc. So let's say onboarding, expansion, renewal, or try, buy, use, like that's the biggest arc. But then inside of them, you have different phases, right? Different phases are named as like stretches inside of them. Setup, configuration, go live, or like doing a test drive, accepting like the contract for the test drive, going to a dealer to actually make the test drive. Like they are actually like smaller phases in that experience. And a step are like the granular actions or tasks customers do within that phase, okay? I mean, L0, L2, structures of journey frameworks, that's something that you already know very well. But within those, it becomes interesting to connect data sources, right? Invite your teammates, run a first report. That's what actually matters, because both your VOC evidence that you're already collecting and your BI metrics can now attach to the same address, if you will. Verbatim from a customer interview, or like a snippet you got from a specific call recording, and the activation rate from your dashboard all belong to the specific step in onboarding when people are setting up their devices and they are connecting them to the internet. Let's just make it very simple. That shared coordinate is what finally makes these three lenses connectable. Not a tag that happens to have the same word, onboarding, but a precise location in a shared structure. So that's the first group, like location primitives. The second group, opportunity, pain point, solution, these are pattern primitives, building blocks as we call them. So let's say an opportunity of improvement, like where you want to put an intervention, like usually isn't like tied to one moment in one journey. It can be, but usually like it's a recurring pattern, right? People experience friction connecting to different data sources when they're using your app. That might appear in onboarding, in the setup stage, right, in a specific step, but also again in expansion and configuration because they're adding more. Same underlying issue, different locations. So without the ontology, these are two separate problems, typically sitting in two separate teams to be fixed. But with it, there's just one pattern you can track, prioritize, and bring people together to actually like create an impact, not only for your customers, but also for your business. A more concrete example on like a consumer side. So let's take a bank, right? Know your customer. That's like a typical process, the KYC process, to identify who you're actually dealing with. The identity verification process that financial services businesses run on with their customers. It happens when someone opens a current account, when they apply for a mortgage, when they want a vehicle financing for their new car. Like every product team typically built their own version of that process independently. They're using third-party vendors, and the bank ends up with like a fragmented experience and no visibility across this pattern. So an ontology makes KYC a single named object in that organization can reason about. The ontology makes knowing your customer location primitive. Really like focus on the customer, using the journey to understand like, okay, KYC is happening for many customers, but it should be standardized. However, the solutions that we are bringing to the KYC process are different in the mortgages business and in the cards business, for example. That can be a problem, but it doesn't have to be. So are there opportunities for us to actually improve that experience? Is there something broken? Do we need to keep it within 90 days, for example, which I know like many companies have as a policy? So where does that break down? Do we have feedback coming in? Do we have metrics indicating that there is something wrong? So once that's there, we can collectively understand the KYC process, where it's broken, what is broken, and who needs to be addressing that. So those are the first two jobs. The third job the ontology does is defining the rules. Not in like prompt engineering, but like structurally. Which pain points have we not touched and are still there? What makes an opportunity validated versus like an assumption? What is the agent, if we're using AI agents on top of that, permitted to create, update, or surface in that data model on its own? And when does it need to stop and involve a human? When rules are embedded in prompts, they're invisible, inconsistent, and fragile. But when they're like structural, they travel with the data regardless of which tools or agents is actually querying it. And that distinction, retrieval versus reasoning, is what like the ontology actually unlocks when you ask me. So defining the entities is not enough on its own. They need to be bounded to actual data. Okay, so insights from your VOC platform need to land at the right phase or step coordinate. So that's obvious. But then you ultimately will use them to make a change, and when that change is changing the impact, the feature, the capability, or the policy has on your customer, that should feed back into like how you measure that for your business. Like, is the cost to serve actually going down? Did we shrink that KYC process to get it back to 90 days? And then you want to see the true line all the way back to like, where did that original evidence come from? So that you can see like, is there new feedback coming in that we're actually missing the mark on that? So support signals is another example from your ticketing system need to link to the pain points of the evidence. Metrics from your BI layer need to attach to the journey phases they measure. And this is where most customer experience data efforts break down. Because the data is wrong, but because it lives in different systems and there is no structure to translate between them. It's a hard problem to solve, don't get me wrong. But it has to be solved, because if you're doing this later and you're like, nah, I don't care about that. Let me just put some structure in place so we can see things, but it's not connected. Then you will get drift again. The moment you ship that like overview, it's stale again. It goes stale quickly. So when the research team has their system, analytics has theirs, product tracks outcomes in a third place, or even like output in a third place, like they are consistent within their teams, but together they're incoherent, they're inconsistent. When the ontology is in place, the binding of the data becomes the work of connecting existing data and existing structure. And the agent that queries the raw tables is actually using the ontology, the meaning between the building blocks across these location primitives. And technology can actually handle the translation. So this is an interesting piece, because now once that context is built, once you have an ontology that works, and it doesn't have to cross the end-to-end enterprise to be useful, you can start in specific places in the business. You can actually have something that is a system that keeps feeding itself, because the context there, the changes have been made, have an impact on like how the context is changing, and therefore how the model is evolving over time. So we're moving away from like specific prompts when you're using your general LLM on top of a big pile of data, but you're actually intentional about like building that customer context. So no new like setup every time a question is asked, but the journey data model becomes the grounding for your internal operations, which is fascinating when you think about it. There's one implementation choice that determines whether any of this actually compounds over time. Because this is the key, right? As I explained, like if you do not integrate all this data correctly, that's a problem on its own. But if you're not intentional about where the ontology lives, then you might also have a problem. Now let me explain. Like if it lives inside the AI layer embedded in a specific model, tool, or agent, it will belong to that system. Every new tool, every new agent, every platform integration requires its own version, and the result will be drift. Because again, you need people to know that all these systems have a different setup and therefore need to be connected in a different way. So more data will actually accelerate that like drifting apart. Each team's AI or agent begin to reflect their local interpretations of what an experience is, what a journey is, what an opportunity means, what evidence shows. So then almost like we're back to square one, right? The enterprise will never achieve like shared understanding or like a grounding truth for their people and AI to reason over. However, if it lives in the data layer, built into the structure where your experience data already lives, it becomes more like a shared foundation. Every agent, every report, every stakeholder, every team can consume the same underlying data or like consumes from the same underlying data. You build it once and it works everywhere. That's an architectural decision that CIOs are making, and the best customer experience teams I'm seeing are with them to make those calls on how to actually build this backbone for like customer context. And it's really hard to do because like it's very easy to just like get a new AI tool, stand it up on its own, just use a little bit of data and then do something with that. But if the ontology ends up embedded in the tool rather than in the layer underneath it, you will have a problem, right? So an ontology is critical. It wasn't critical before, as I explained. Like there's so many different teams that were filling the gaps as there are humans, as they can like have this like shared context across these different teams. But now that we're willing to invest in AI and want to have high quality output from our AI across the different parts of the business, now it becomes really important to have a data model that has primitives for location, like how do these different data sets relate, and objects inside of them, building blocks inside of them that can actually like have relationships on their own. So then you have location primitives and a way to traverse that relations across these locations. So let me bring it back to like the original problem. Your AI agents, your AI quality isn't problematic because the models aren't good enough. They're problematic because the data environment was built for people to interpret, not for machines to reason over. So these three lenses your organization uses to understand like customers are real, they're valuable, you already have the data. They're just not connected in a good way for AI to reason over that. And investing in an experience ontology is actually what connects them. Location primitives that gives the data a shared address, and then pattern primitives that make the cross-journey signals visible. And then some rules on top of that, what the agent can do with that. And all of them should be living in a data layer, not locked inside a single tool. So when the foundation is in place, insight quality stops being like an AI problem and becomes a data management problem, which is something you can solve, which is something you hold the keys to, and you're not depending on like an external model provider. So this is a problem your organization can actually solve, knows how to solve. And the enterprises that are doing this well won't be the ones that deploy like the most agents. They will be the one that build this context layer that agents run on. And I think like that's a fascinating development. We've been building that at Daydo, and the experience context platform is like the data layer primitive. Journey phase is step structure, and then we have opportunities and pain points, for example, as objects in them, as building blocks in them. The evidence links and the metric connect to the underlying systems. So we're not necessarily the features of an AI interface, but the foundation that AI agents can run on. So Daydo agent is the first agent that we've built to reason over this, but now we're exposing it to the enterprise, so you can build your own agents on top of that, connected to your favorite LLMs. But then you're basically splitting like the data management problem from the AI quality problem. If your organization is about to make a significant AI investment in customer experience, this is the question you need to be asking before you commit to do anything. Where is your ontology currently? What is the state of it? Is it going live? Do you manage it? Who's responsible for that? Have we designed it well? Curious to hear, drop your answer or your current situation in the comments, and I'm going to read all of them and feed it back into the next episode.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Daydo, the AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, keep pushing the edge and stay inspired. See you in the next episode.